Okay, we are live on YouTube. We just give it another 2 minutes for everyone to join. Okay. Wendy, good evening. Ben,
Good evening, Bob Brian.
welcome.
You. Good evening, brothers.
Sawubona mfowethu Malwande.
Evening.
Oh, Ben.
Uyaphila?
Ngiyaphileka kunjani kuwe?
Hayi siyaphila.
Siyabonga.
Yeah.
Yebo wasipiwe.
Spiwe is somewhere.
I'm driving. I'm struggling to hear.
The last time I heard from you, it was before the end of the league.
No. Let's leave the past to the past. All things have become new now, eh?
The last time I checked, you said you are going to take the league.
Yeah, I'm standing on 1 Corinthians there. Behold, all things have become new.
Oh, I see.
5:17.
Love it. Very good. Condon, good evening, brother.
Good evening.
That's not a very confident good evening.
Yeah, the sign is yeah.
The sun has set. What?
And that's what I was saying. The sinus is affecting.
Oh, the sinuses.
Speaking.
The sun has.
Okay. Sinus, yeah.
I understand. Because you live between Joburg and Pretoria. It's like how long will you waver between two opinions? I don't know. I just made that up. I thought that was funny. Alrighty. Let's get ourselves going here. Let me pray, and then we see which way we can go. Lord, we're grateful to be gathered again, and ask your continued help in opening and understanding your word. Would you lead and guide our discussion, Lord, that we can encourage one another and build each other up, not only in our faith, but also in the unique area of ministry that you've called us to, whether it is in pastoral ministry or in building your church as a member, or whatever it is you've called us to. Lord, we come to hear your voice, and we come to be strengthened according to all that you have for us in your all-sufficient word. And so we come with anticipation and expectation to grow and learn together. In your name we pray. Amen. Okay, what do we learn? So let me just it's probably always a good idea to backtrack a little bit and ask what has been bubbling under since our conversation last evening. What is there anything that you maybe wanted to just recap or push back on, or make a comment on from last night? Nothing. No. Must be
It's about it's about the Joshua wrote most of the book, and it's about Joshua helped preserve his historical records. We even learn about the part of God's law. He wrote the parts of God's law, and the priests such as Elza and Phineas were responsible for preserving the scriptures. And
Yeah, carry on.
yes, it is to the purpose of Joshua's book was record what God did through Joshua to help the later generation apply those lessons to their own situations.
So, what do you think the lesson is for Israel in all her generations from the book of Joshua? What are they supposed to learn from it?
They're supposed to learn not to worship the idols, because we know that the Israelites they were they were divided, and when Joshua inherited the Canaan, it was God's purpose that Joshua must go to Canaan because the Canaanites didn't worship the true God; they were idols
Right.
in Canaan. Yes.
And that also brings us back to the point that I was making last night, and I wonder maybe you can just reflect on that. Maybe just give me your thoughts. I asked this question: who gets to go into the promised land? You might phrase it differently. You might say, who is the promised land for? And what are the requirements for entering to the promised land? What would you say in response to that? If I were to say to you, or somebody came and said, but what's the requirements for entering the promised land? What do you think you can say from the whole of the Pentateuch and from Joshua in that sense? Anybody who wants to give an answer?
Briefly, I think looking back, we remember the first generation that did not go through or didn't get into the promised land because they did not trust God, and then as a result, they had to wander in the wilderness. So I would say the requirement to enter to the promised land it is to trust God.
Right. And the that trust of God looks like something, and it looks like walk before me and be blameless. Aaron's, you want to add?
Yes, thank you so much. I just want to touch base on something perhaps you might have mentioned yesterday that if I can put it in my own words, that the promised land belongs
Aaron's, I'm losing you.
belongs to those whom the Lord had promised. Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Carry on.
Yes, I was saying that the promised land does not necessarily belong to, or it did not belong to those who entered because they qualified to be there. They did not necessarily qualify, but it was because of the covenant or the promise that the Lord had made with Abraham, that his children will inherit the promised land. So, in order for us to enter the promised land, we need to connect with this covenant and the promise that the Lord had made to our father Abraham.
Right. So you have this picture of the promise is the basis. That is why anybody gets to go into the promised land, because God said you're going into the promised land. right? That's the basis of it. But what is the whole big story? God is bringing his people in to have fellowship. He's restoring them to fellowship with himself. And he begins that through Moses. He represents that through the tabernacle. And the land is the place of restoration and rest. But the law is given in Exodus 20 as a mirror to show them and us that they fall dramatically and irrecoverably short of the glory of God. And so if we were to merit, if we were to earn, in a sense, entry into the promised land, we would be sunk. And yet, what we see is that the promised land is for the righteous. So how do we become righteous? And this is the covenant of grace. God makes the way. God makes the way, and he makes it, first of all, through the tabernacle as a placeholder that their sins can be covered, their defilement can be cleansed, until the righteous man appears, who is the only one who can keep the righteous requirements of the law, and the only one who rightfully should go into the promised land, and that is Christ. And so because the blessings of the covenant flow to him as our covenant head, we receive all those blessings. We receive restoration. We receive fellowship. We receive the blessing of being in God's presence. So that's the overall picture, and you have to keep that in mind. I was just listening to what is an excellent conversation in most respects with Professor John Lennox. He's an incredibly mostly reliable Christian apologist. You probably know John Lennox. He's a mathematics professor at Oxford. But one thing about John is no matter who's interviewing him and no matter what the context, you will not go very far before he shares the gospel with you, and it's really well appreciated. But in the conversation, the conversation turns towards, yes, but who gets to go to heaven, and why do good people not get to go to heaven, and even if they're good, and why do bad people do? And the whole question centers on, yes, but people want to go to heaven, and people don't want to go to hell. So why is God not fair in that way? And it's entirely the wrong question. Because I want to say, the issue isn't where you live for eternity. The question is who you live with and who you live for. You see, the blessing of the promised land is not the land. It is the God who is in the land, who brings his people in. And so at no point should the people of God expect to experience the great blessings that God offers and yet reject God himself. That is the story of Israel, and that is the story of the church. That is what's happening in John 6, when the people flock to find Jesus the next day after he's fed the 5,000 men. And he comes to them and he says, you're not looking for me. You came looking because I fed you and you had your fill and were satisfied. And the warning of this text, and we'll get to it in more detail later on this evening. We get to chapter 23, 24. The warning of Joshua is, yes, you can be externally in the covenant. You can experience the blessings of the covenant. But if God is not your God, then no matter how connected you are to the community, no matter how involved you are in your church, no matter how many times you stand up in the front and speak, if God is not your God, you will fall. That's it. And that's really the question. So it's that question of, Santo spoke about the idolatry of the Canaanites. The idolatry of the Canaanites exposes the idolatry in all of our hearts, because they come into the land and eventually they fall away. So Joshua is this story of God finishing what he started, and the test for these people is not only do they trust God, but is that trust personal? Is that trust saying, this is my God? So that's a way of introduction, I think, which may be helpful. Any other thoughts or comments on that?
Yeah, Brian, I just want to say very sobering thoughts there.
Yeah, which we need to take to heart, right? And we need to test. That's what Paul says, 2 Corinthians 13, test yourself. See that you're in the faith. See that you're in Christ, is what he means. Here's a comment on the original meaning. The book of Joshua was written about Israel's victorious conquest, tribal inheritance, and covenant loyalty. Those are the three movements that we see in the book, the three major sections. In Joshua's day, so it's all written about Joshua's day to address similar challenges facing later generations. And that's really the purpose of the histories, right? So we can keep looking back and seeing what God has done, and remind ourselves. I thought this map is helpful to see where the land ends up. So let's just talk about this for a short time. Let's start. I think I've got a bigger map on the next page. Oh, okay. You're gonna have to read this sideways, but at least it's bigger. Okay, so if you're struggling to read it, turn your computer or your phone sideways. Mount Nebo is here. No, let me just see if I can make this thing highlight something. Aha, pointer, highlighter. Aha, okay, here's Mount Nebo, right? So what's the relevance of Mount Nebo? What do you remember in terms of the story? What's happening at Mount Nebo? So I'll give you the answer. This is where we are in Deuteronomy. So they come back. They come back to Mount Nebo. Let's look at the beginning of Deuteronomy. This is where we start. If somebody's got Deuteronomy open, you can just double check me on this. Moses, the whole story happens here. So now, if you just work it out, what's not on this map is Kadesh Barnea. Kadesh Barnea is somewhere in this region. What's the significance of Kadesh Barnea? That's where they came the first time, right? So that's where they start, and this is where the failure happens, and then they end up wandering around and around and around and around and around for 40 years, and eventually they've come up, and they're right on the edge. It's up on Mount Nebo that Moses dies, right? Just check me if I've got them. Sometimes I get these names confused, and then all things go south. So if you ever think I'm telling you a lie, just call me out, because I might get the names confused. It happens sometimes. There we go. You can see at the end of chapter 34, Moses went up from the plains of Moab to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, which is opposite Jericho. Opposite Jericho, as in, you can see it's across there. This area here is Moab. So let me just see if I've got another. I don't have. I'll come back to that one in a moment. So let's get rid of all of this highlighting now. How do I make it go away? There must be an easier way. This is called learning on the fly, right?
Brian?
There we go. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. You got it. Now you got it. I was going to try and...
No, very good. Okay. Look in the middle here. There's Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. We'll come back to these in a little while. That's significant. There's Shiloh. From yesterday's conversation, what's at Shiloh? What gets set up at Shiloh? Starts with a T.
Tabernacle.
Tabernacle.
Is it not the Ark of the Covenant or the tabernacle?
So the Ark of the Covenant is in the tabernacle and gets set up at Shiloh. All right. So what are you looking at here on this map? What they are doing is they go from Mount Nebo, and then the Joshua begins by crossing the Jordan River, and they Israel crosses the Jordan in chapter 3. They set out for Shittim. They came to the Jordan, and he and all the people in Israel, they lodged there before they passed over. So it's Shittim is not on the map unless somebody can see it here, but they're crossing. So they come around effectively from this side towards the Jordan, and then they cross over. Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh, or you might say half of the tribe of Manasseh, stay on this side because they say to Moses, the land here is good. We can have this land. Give us part of this land. And so that's why Reuben, Gad, and Manasseh are here. Then Judah, over there, along with Simeon and Dan, who eventually ends up at the top over here. They move around. There's another part of Manasseh. There's two. So Manasseh divides the tribe in half and splits. Then you've got Asher, Zebulun, Naphtali, Issachar, Ephraim, Benjamin. So this is the original allotment of the land. It moves around over time, but that's where they land. Now, if you take a checkpoint on what that looks like, so there's our map on the right-hand side. If you map that into Israel today, just to give you an idea of what's going on, you can see the extent of the land. So Israel now borders as far south as Egypt, and so there's this long point down to the Gulf. Let me just go back a moment. Here's the Gaza Strip, and this is all West Bank, and this is then Israel in the middle. So what do you notice about that? And I don't have any specific point in mind when I ask that question, but how does that map in? I mean, what does that map tell you? Anything that you might want to comment on that? This is where Joshua's first conquest was. Is it big? Is it small? What do you think? Yeah, go for it. Yes, Sante.
According to the map that you are showing us, from when they distribute the land, each tribe from Reuben, Gad, Manasseh, they receive a large, according the way I saw in the map, they receive the large and the largest and more prominent inheritances given to Joshua, Ephraim, and Manasseh, reflecting their special role in Israel's history.
Okay, so you're noticing the size of these tribes on the right and on the eastern side of the Jordan River, and you're saying that seems to be more significant. Now, that's an interesting comment, and remember last evening we were talking about the allotment, which doesn't seem to be equal, but the allotment is, in terms of physical size, is not equal. The allotment is in terms of what is needed for the size of the tribe that is settling there. So Reuben and Gad get a larger piece of land for their needs. But notice something else, just on that comment of the significance. Come to the time of Jesus, just as a way of considering this. And let's look here in the top corner. So this Sea of Kinnereth is you would recognize as the Sea of Galilee, right? Maybe if you've got a Bible with a map in the back, you can quickly page there and say, and look at Israel in the time of Jesus. Let me give you a clue. If I put a little spot here, roughly there is Capernaum, where Jesus lived. Most of his ministry was done out of Capernaum. Across the Sea of Galilee, at the time of Jesus, what is this area here? What do you know about it? Anybody? Where did he heal Legion? Starts with a G.
Jerusalem.
That starts with a J. Close. Gennesaret.
Nazareth.
Gennesaret. This area on the eastern side of Galilee is the Decapolis. This is a Gentile area. This is all pagan, right? So over time, and you've got to understand that you've got to look at the whole history of Israel, but it's just noteworthy to say that over time, what happens to Israel is they lose all of this land. Now, let me just show you something else. Look at, if I've got a map, look at this by way of comparison. Okay, so look at how big the kingdom becomes under Solomon. Look at the extent of it. You'll notice a parallel here. The southwestern border with Egypt is the same as it is today, or very similar. And then it runs from all the way up. There's a huge tract of land. So there's much success under Solomon, which eventually all collapses, right? So that's just a way of looking at the story of Israel's history as it ebbs and flows, and it all starts by crossing the Jordan River somewhere over here. So that positions us quite nicely, I think. All right, let's get to the meat of the conquest itself. Yes, who's there? Ding ding. Wait, I'm looking at the wrong screen. I can't see you. Ben, go ahead, brother.
Yes, sorry maybe to take you off course, but I don't know if in the book of Revelation chapter 7, I'm missing the tribe of Dan there. Any reason maybe why?
That is an interesting and important comment for interpreting the book of Revelation, because in that list, it's not only Dan that's missing. I can't remember, one of the other smaller tribes is also missing. And in that list in Revelation 7, you'll notice that Joseph is there. I think it's in that list. Joseph is there, and Manasseh, and Ephraim. Let me check if you've got it open, Ben. You can check us. which just in terms of, I'll quickly just say this, in fact, yeah, Ephraim is missing in this list, but Manasseh is there and Joseph is there. So it at least hints, but you can deal with that in more detail. In fact, you're going to, I think in 2 weeks' time, do Revelation with Jim. You can deal with that in more detail. It points to the symbolic nature of that list, that it is not intended to be a comprehensive list of Israel. I think that's part of the clue there. But so I'm just going to. That's a quick answer, Ben, but there's more to be thought about, and I would recommend that you take it up in detail when we get to Revelation. It does, however, give us an opportunity to just give careful thought to. Just again, let me go back to the main picture of the allotment, just to recap something which is important, which is Jacob had 12 sons, hence 12 tribes, and yet in the allotment, Levi has no land. Joseph is not here, but his sons Ephraim and Manasseh are. And so that's in a sense what we discover is that Joseph becomes the firstborn son. He receives the blessing of being the firstborn son, a double portion. And Levi, we said last night, Levi does not receive any land because the Lord is his portion. And so they spread around all through this area. And so when you read through Joshua, I think it's Joshua in particular that it comes out, you'll see two phrases that come together. The one is the half tribe of Manasseh, which means Manasseh and Ephraim form two halves of Joseph. That's the one way to see it. And the other phrase, you've got to read it very carefully, otherwise you get lost. Sometimes it says the half tribe of Manasseh, in which case it means all of Manasseh. And sometimes it says half the tribe of Manasseh. And when it says half the tribe of Manasseh, it's this division here, which has been referred to, the fact that they end up in two different places. So that's just a helpful thing, just to orient us in terms of Israel's history and why we end up with the tribes spread like they are. But Ben, I'm going to bat your question towards the Revelation class. It's a very good and a very important question for interpreting that list in Revelation 7. There's no particular reason that Dan might be singled out as lost, except, and the one thing you can say about Dan when you get to the end of the book of Judges is they're in trouble. They're troublemakers. They're not a reliable tribe in terms of loyalty, covenant loyalty. And you read that at the end of the book of Judges. And that might reflect something in why they're missing in that list. Let's just look around a little bit again, the history of Joshua, and ask this question: why aren't all the Canaanites driven out? So what we discover in Judges 1, so once we've finished with Joshua, you get to Judges, and you discover that they are struggling, the people are struggling to drive some of the nations out. And part of the reason for that is it had already been promised through Moses that God would not simply drive all the nations out, because it simply says, if I drive all the nations out before you in one go, the land will become desolate. So it has to be inhabited for it to be cared for, and so they drive them out steadily. But then we also learn that God leaves some of the nations behind to serve as a test for Israel. And so that is really important, because there is some land still to be conquered. So when we come to chapter 13, you have a list of things that has not been conquered. And then a list of the inheritances and the allotments, and so it goes on. And then eventually we discover that God has not driven everybody out. Why does he not drive everybody out at the same time? What is the reason that God leaves some of the nations behind?
To test them.
Yeah, very good. Very good. I'm looking for the text. Do you have a reference on that? We'll find it now. So, oh, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. It's actually in. I thought it was in Joshua. It's in Judges. The Judges 3 verse 4, they were for the testing of Israel to know whether Israel would obey the commandments of the Lord, which he commanded their fathers by the hand of Moses. So the people of Israel lived among the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And their daughters they took to themselves for wives, and their own daughters they gave to their sons, and they served their gods. So Ben's point is exactly right. In Exodus 23, we have the promise that God is preserving the land. Let's just, I just want to look that up. The text that's on your screen. 23:29. If I look at the right verse, it'll work. I will not drive them out before you in 1 year, lest the land become desolate and the wild beasts multiply against you. Little by little I will drive them out from before you until you have increased and possessed the land. I will set your border from the Red Sea to the Sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness to the Euphrates. Massive area. Now, there's an orderliness. There's the text that I was looking for right on the screen. There's an orderliness to the way God does this. So you see, so what you see in Joshua is exactly what you expect. That they come through. Their victory is steady, and they move through section by section, tribe by tribe. But what's surprising, but also not unexpected, perhaps, is that Israel starts not doing so well. And by the time you get to Judges, you discover that some of the nations have been left. All right. Now, I want to just ask then, as a last question, go to Joshua 22, verse 43. While you're looking that up, I will read you Judges 2, verse 14. So I'll read from verse 11. The people of Israel did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and served the Baals, and they abandoned the Lord, the God of their fathers, who had brought them out of the land of Egypt. And they went after other gods from among the gods of the peoples who were around them, and bowed down to them, and they provoked the Lord to anger. They abandoned the Lord and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. So the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them over to plunderers who plundered them. And he sold them into the hand of their surrounding enemies, so that they could no longer withstand their enemies. Whenever they marched out, the hand of the Lord was against them for harm, as the Lord had warned, as the Lord had sworn to them, and they were in terrible distress. It's very strongly worded. What do you read then in Joshua 22:43? Somebody comment on what you see in Joshua 22.
Brian, there's no verse 43 in Joshua 22.
It's Joshua 21. I must just share this with you. I used to look at lecturers who made that kind of mistake, and I think, how hard is it to get a text right? And then I started lecturing, and then I discovered how hard it is to get a text right. It's Joshua 21. verse 43. Conlon, do you want to just page back there and read that for us? Read 43 to 45.
So the Lord gave Israel all the land he had sworn to give their ancestors, and they took possession of it and settled there. So the Lord gave them rest on every side, just as he had sworn to their ancestors. Not one of their enemies withstood them. The Lord gave all their enemies into their hands. Not one of all the Lord's good promises to Israel failed. Every one was fulfilled.
Those are very absolute words, aren't they? Not one of the promises failed. Every one of them is fulfilled. They have rest from all their enemies. None of their enemies are able to withstand them. That's what you're seeing in Joshua. But in practical terms, what does that look like? Well, it looks like everywhere that they have gone, they have been victorious. And they have captured the land from top to bottom. But the job is still not done. Isn't that interesting? There are still pockets of the Canaanites which still need to be driven out. And so it's a story of God keeping his covenant promise. And so this is theologically a very important point that is being made here in Joshua. That God has kept his promise. Israel has the land that was promised to Abram. 400, nearly 500 years prior to this land was promised to them. That's a long time to wait. But the reality of that picture is that interspersed in between them are all these little nations that are left there as a test for them, as a test to see if they will keep up the momentum of trusting God. And there are consequences for breaking covenant with God. And that's what we then are called to pay attention to at the end of Joshua. Okay, we'll get to that in a moment. Let me just see what we have coming up. We've spoken about the Levites who have the Lord as their portion. Let me just mention something about the Levites again. Santo, quite a lot earlier in this conversation, Santo, you mentioned Eleazar, the priest. Now, I don't remember if I said this in our last Pentateuch class. Maybe just by way of an important recap. Who are the tribes that are judged at Kadesh Barnea, who lose their lives and don't go into the promised land because they wander in the desert for 40 years? Are the Levites affected by that curse, by that judgment? Do you remember? Did we speak about that? And if we didn't, what do you think?
Can I just take a bite there?
Yes, Viwe.
Was it not Manasseh, Ephraim, Zebulun, I think Asher, Naphtali, and Dan?
So I'll help you out there. It's all 11, or you might say 12, counting if you count Ephraim and Manasseh as separate, because if you count Ephraim and Manasseh as two tribes, there's actually 13 tribes, because Ephraim and Manasseh are the sons of Joseph. But the one that wouldn't make it onto your list, beware, is Levi. The Levites were in the book of Numbers. The very first census in the book of Numbers counts all of the fighting men over the age of 20, and it gives you a number. So Numbers chapter 1 verse 2, take a census of all the congregation of the people of Israel by clans, by fathers' houses, according to the number of names, every male, head by head, from 20 years old and upward, and all in Israel who are able to go to war, you and Aaron shall list them, company by company. And so they count them. That's what they do. But verse 47 of Numbers chapter 1, that the Levites were not listed along them by their ancestral tribe. For the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, only the tribe of Levi you shall not list, and you shall not take a census of them among the people of Israel. But appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of the testimony, and over all its furnishings, and over all that belongs to it. They are to carry the tabernacle and all its furnishings, and they shall take care of it and camp around the tabernacle. And so then it continues with some instructions for the Levites. You see, the point is that the tribes who are numbered are those who are going to conquer the land. The Levites are never called to conquer the land. That's not their calling. Their calling is to minister at the tabernacle on behalf of the nation, on behalf of the other tribes. And so what happens in chapter 13, when we come to Kadesh Barnea and the people rebel, there's one from every one of those tribes, or no Levite is appointed a spy to go and look at the land. And the people rebel in chapter 14, and God says that every one of the tribes that have been numbered over the age of 20, those people will not go in. And those are the people who fall in the desert. And so that's why you discover that the Levites have actually survived the wilderness wandering. And Eleazar, who is Aaron's third son, because Nadab and Abihu were his two older sons and they were killed. Eleazar arrives, and he is a high priest who accompanies Joshua as we said yesterday, effectively a proto-king, prototype king of Israel. So that's just important to note, that we read the scriptures for what is there, and take note of some of these little details. You follow the Lord where you are called, right? So the Levites are called to minister before the tabernacle. I don't know that there's any. I've been teaching that little tidbit for a while now. I don't know that there's any further theological significance to it, except that it's electing grace, isn't it? Any quick comment on that before I move on? All good. At the very least, those of you who are teaching in the church, you should stop saying, like I had to stop saying, that the only two men who went into the promised land were Joshua and Caleb, because it's not true, right? There's a lot more that go in with them. So just take that to heart. Then the cities of refuge are then described and given. These are places that deal with justice and mercy. So the whole idea of a city of refuge is if you accidentally kill your neighbor, you chop in wood and the axe head flies off and whacks him in the head and he dies. And then there's a culture of a blood avenger who is going to come after you. And so the city of refuge, and interesting, the blood avenger is not part of the law of Israel. It seems to be a cultural adjustment that the Lord gives them here. The city of refuge represents the mercy of God. So anybody who's been pursued, if for manslaughter, so accidental death of somebody else, they can take refuge in one of these cities until the high priest, that current high priest, dies, and then the blood avenger is declared to have no case against him, and he is free to go. But if he leaves the city and he is killed outside by the avenger, that his blood is on his own head. If the city leaders allow the blood avenger in to kill him, his blood is on them. So that's the importance of that little detail as we move through Joshua, as to why the cities of refuge are counted and given to us in that level of detail. Then, so that's chapter 20, and chapter 21 has the pasture lands allotted for the Levites. We touched on this yesterday, and I think it's worthwhile just reiterating this just once again, that what you are seeing play out in front of you as you read the book of Joshua is Christ conquering his enemies. Right? Let me just ask, why can we say, so my question might be obvious to us by now, but it's not always obvious to all people reading the Bible. Why can I make a statement that Joshua conquering Canaan is Christ conquering the nations? How would you connect those two realities? Anybody want to give that a go? Yes, Santu. You're muted, sister. There we go.
I would say Joshua pointed to future covenant established through the Messiah, that is Jesus.
So that is definitely the case, that Joshua is, we would say, a type of Christ, and one of the strongest types of Christ in the Old Testament is because he leads his people into rest. He leads his people into the promised land. His name, he has the same name as Jesus. But there's something even more closely related which we can say, which is, if you follow Paul's reasoning in 1 Corinthians 10, Christ is with them in the desert, right? If you go to Joshua chapter 5, as we mentioned last night, the captain of the armies of the Lord is Christ himself, that Joshua sees outside Jericho. And so Christ, as the second person of the Trinity, is leading the charge in terms of bringing his people, a people of his own possession, into the land, keeping his promises. Now, as new covenant believers, where's our land? What would you say?
Brian,
Arnold?
would I say the new heaven and the new earth when Jesus Christ returns back?
So I think that is a valid answer, and some people would say yes, but you then just spiritualizing the promises. No, not spiritualizing the promises. The new heavens and the new earth is not a mere vapor reality somewhere. It's a real place. It's this earth renewed. It's the chair that you're sitting on, but without the effects of sin, right? And maybe you don't have a chair. I don't know. It is a real place. And it is the promise to Abraham fulfilled, in which he doesn't receive only the land of Israel, the land between the rivers, but he receives the entire earth. The meek shall inherit the earth. It is a promise in which Christ is given not only Jacob as his inheritance, but all nations as his inheritance. And in a very real sense, then, the nation, the physical nation of Israel in the physical land is a precursor, a type of the future reality which is to come. And so Christ is as much a king today as Joshua was a conqueror of Canaan. There is nothing less in the blessing and the reality of the new covenant than Joshua experienced. In fact, we have considerably more in the new covenant. And that's just helpful and important to remember that. But we've been through that point in some detail last evening, so I'll just leave that with you for your imagination. Let me just quickly run through these thoughts, and then we'll take a brief. In fact, maybe let's rather do this the other way around. Let's take a 7-minute stretch break. It's now 2 minutes to 7 on my clock. We'll start again at 7 minutes past, and I'll run you through this very brief overview of a biblical theology of the kingdom of God, and then we'll get into more of Joshua. So if there's any other questions or things that you'd like us to touch on, please just bring them back as we come back. So let's start again at 5 minutes past 7. And we're back. Hope everybody got their coffee and their snacks, their popcorn, or just dinner. Or are you still waiting for dinner? Okay, welcome back. All right. Here's what I'm going to do. Let's move forward, and we've touched on some of the points of this already, and then we'll double back as we have time at the end to some of the bigger picture. So you'll notice in what becomes a very high level survey of Joshua that we've kind of spent a lot of time at the beginning, and we're going to spend the rest of our time in Joshua at the end. But in the middle, what's going on in the middle? In the middle is the conquest. In the middle is the allocation of the land. In the middle is God keeping his promises. But it all comes to a sharp point as you get to chapter 23 and chapter 24. And that sets up, in a sense, the rest of Israel's story. So we're going to go on to covenant loyalty and wrap it up. Before we do that, let me ask the same question I asked at the end of our session last night. Are there any further burning questions that come to mind from what you've seen in the videos or what we've spoken about this evening, up to this point, before we move on to these last two chapters? Is there anything that you would like to just say, wait a minute, what about this? Everybody basically happy, right? Why do the tribes, the eastern tribes, set up a memorial stone, the altar of witness, at the end of chapter, or middle of chapter 22? Do you remember? So it's that same story that I mentioned earlier of the tribes as Manasseh and Reuben.
Yeah.
Yes, Arnold?
Sorry, Ben. Yeah, I kind of went through this a little bit. I could be wrong, but correct me if I am. Is this when, yeah, I think Manasseh and Reuben had erected what the other tribe they've just erected an idol.
So they erect the memorial stones because the promise that they made, the commitment they made to Moses is, yes, we will settle now outside of the land because this land is good for us. And then Moses said, well, that's fine, but you don't get out of helping your brothers take their land, right? Because they didn't have to conquer the land that they settled in. So they said, so they send their fighting men across the Jordan, and their wives and their little ones and their livestock stay behind. And when the job is done, so chapter 22, they return back over the Jordan, and they set up memorial stones, and Joshua and Eleazar the priest think that they're setting up an alternative system of worship, and they say, no. We don't want you to forget that we're on the other side of the river. We want you to remember that we have kept our promise. Right, so that's the story of what's going on there. Speedway, you had your hand up.
No, actually, I just wanted to comment on the sound. There's a bit of an echo there, so I don't know what do you have wrong today as compared to the other days.
This might be it. Is that better? Better?
Yeah, I think it only echoes when somebody else speaks. But
Oh,
when you speak, it's okay.
okay.
But when one of the brothers are speaking, it echoes.
Okay. It's for emphasis. It's an echo for emphasis. I think I know it. I think I might have got it now. Thanks for that, Spiwe.
Brian?
Hello, Arnold.
Sorry, I actually just wanted to comment just on that episode or that part of the story. I think it was very wise for the tribes with the greater numbers who were coming to confront Manasseh and Reuben. I think it was very wise for them because it was almost like an imminent war, civil war type thing, and just as a last sense check, they were like, wait, can we send a delegate?
Yeah.
Or some delegates to actually go. When I read that, I was like, wow, thank God for that, because they were so close to fighting.
And that really does highlight something about the nature of this confederation of tribes. It's very fragile. Not only now, but as the history continues, it is fragile. There's always this infighting between the tribes. It's never quite settled, and it gets its greatest expression then with the division of the northern and the southern kingdom, which you get to after Solomon. So that then settles everything down, and it brings us into chapter 23 and obviously to 24. I want to zoom in terms of covenant renewal. This little section that I said we will get to, Mount Ebal, Mount Gerizim, and Shechem in the middle. What is the significance? What do you remember from Deuteronomy about these two mountains? What is Joshua up to as he brings them together? So let's just, while you're thinking about an answer to that question, let me just take you there. Joshua gathered all the tribes of Israel to Shechem, this is chapter 24, and summoned the elders, the heads, and the judges, and the officers of Israel. And they presented themselves before God. And so he recounts the story, and then he gets to the very well-known charge that he puts them: choose this day whom you will serve. What is going on with Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal? So go back to Deuteronomy 27. I also want to check back on 11. So Deuteronomy 11 verse 26, Moses says, "See, I am setting before you today a blessing and a curse. The blessing if you obey the commandments of the Lord your God, which I command you today. And the curse if you do not obey the commandments of the Lord your God, but turn aside from the way that I am commanding you today, to go after other gods which you have not known. And when the Lord your God brings you into the land that you are entering to take possession of it, you shall set the blessing on Mount Gerizim and the curse on Mount Ebal. Are they not beyond the Jordan, west of the road, toward the going down of the sun, in the land of the Canaanites who live in the Arabah, opposite Gilgal, beside the oak of Moreh?" In case they needed some clear directions as to how to find it. And so that's what they're called to. And then chapter 27, he climbs into the detail of that. 27 from verse 11, verse 12. "When you have crossed over the Jordan, these shall stand on Mount Gerizim to bless the people: Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Joseph, and Benjamin. And ye shall stand on Mount Ebal for the curse, Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. And the Levites shall declare to all the men of Israel in a loud voice. And then it goes through the blessings and the curses. We'll begin with the curses and then the blessings. What do you think is the theological significance of why they come back to Shechem? And just before that, in chapter 8 of Joshua, so you got, it's kind of bookends the story. Chapter 8 of Joshua, he builds an altar on Mount Ebal, just as Moses the servant had commanded the people of Israel, an altar of uncut stones. They offered a burnt offering, and they stand all around the ark on Ebal and Gerizim. So there's the story. And then in chapter 24, he brings them back to Shechem, which is between Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim. What is the point, the covenant theological point that Joshua is trying to make to these people, do you think?
Can I take a swipe there, Brian?
Yeah, Spiwe and then Mawandi.
Yeah, isn't it to remind them that basically what this whole thing is about covenant. It's not about performance. I think when you look at that, Moses is bringing them to those two mountains to remind them that this one represents a curse, this one represents a blessing. So it basically fulfills the instruction which was in Deuteronomy 28. Reminded that this is all about covenant. It has nothing to do with you. It has nothing to do with whether you perform or what, or whether you deserve a blessing or what. And that's just my 2 cents worth. I'm just taking a swipe. I'm driving. If I'm wrong, you'll forgive me. I'm driving.
I think you're onto something. Mawandi, what do you think?
I think me and Spew, we have the same point. I wanted to highlight that the place in Shechem, it is the covenant location. If we remember in the book of Genesis chapter 12, we see Abraham built an altar there, and then in Genesis chapter 35, we see Jacob renewed his commitment to God there. And then now Joshua brings the nation of Israel for a covenant there. So I would say that place has a covenant. It's a covenant location.
Yeah, very good, Mawandi, and you're on point, Spiwe. Arnold, your comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to add as well that the Mount Ebal and Mount Gerizim were almost like visual aids. So when we look, if we were to pass through, if any of them were passing through, I mean, they would always remember. So I think they're almost like visual aids to say there are blessings and curses to this covenant, and covenant loyalty is a requirement.
And the visual aids are reminders, and I think that's a very powerful. It's very important. We as people, that we're made that way. We need reminders. That's why the Lord has given us the sacraments as reminders of who we are. And Spee was making the point that this will always remind them. And Mawandi is saying this is always the place of covenant. It is intended as a reminder. But what is one of the problems with physical reminders? Think about our own country and the renaming of streets and towns. Right? Who are the people that remember who those people are? The street is renamed after someone. But who remembers? I think the first people who name that street, they remember. And some of the names are prominent, right? Some names you can't get away from. Nelson Mandela Boulevard, Solomon Mahlangu, Winnie Mandela. Those all stay, they're very fresh in our collective memory, but only very few people might remember. Is it Simon Bopape? Somebody's going to remember. But over time, here's my point. Generation to generation, the symbol itself is of no value if you do not teach the next generation. And this is the story. They've got all these symbols, they've got all this history, and they take it for granted. And so it's up to every generation to teach the next generation that this is what God has done. This is who our God is. And these things are given to us as reminders. And that's exactly what the sacraments are there for. So in the Passover, Moses tells the people, when your son asks you, why do we do this every year? You say, we were slaves in Egypt, but God has redeemed us. Right? So when your son or your daughter asks you, but why do we take the Lord's Supper? We were slaves, my boy, my girl, but God has redeemed us. We are not like the other people because God has redeemed us. So those are very important reminders. And so that's the story of Ebal and Gerizim. Just interestingly, in John 4 verse 5, it's Mount Gerizim that the Samaritan woman says to Jesus, our father said we must worship here. But that's connected to the northern tribe split and the story of the Samaritans. Let's just talk about then on the left hand side of the screen the tabernacle. We briefly mentioned last evening that it's so it's at Shiloh. It's set up at Shiloh. It's temporary, but the ark, Spiwa, you mentioned the ark earlier. The ark stays in a tent until David establishes Jerusalem. And so where you might ask, does the story of the Exodus finally end? And I actually gave you the answer to that question yesterday, but it's very helpful for us to see it laid out for us. I think we read this text last night, Deuteronomy 12, verse 10. When you go over the Jordan and live in the land that the Lord your God has given you to inherit, and he gives you rest from all your enemies all around so that you live in safety, then to the place the Lord your God will choose to make his name dwell there, there you shall bring all that I command you. Right? So how do we know that the Exodus is achieving its purpose? And what do we mean by the Exodus? Well, you can say it's the whole story of I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. That story of taking them from having no rest in Egypt to having rest. And so the word rest is really fundamental in understanding the story. So look at that first text on the right hand side under rest, Joshua 21, 43 to 45. The Lord gave them rest on every side. We read that a moment ago. So what does that tell us? God is keeping his promises. The objective is being fulfilled. So whenever you see rest popping out in the scriptures, you should sit up and take note and go, this has to do with covenant inheritance. This has to do with covenant promise. So I want to just point out then some of the meat on the bones here. 1 Corinthians 28. Corinthians. I said this last night as well, didn't I? Chronicles. 1 Chronicles 28:20. Does somebody want to look that up? Maybe Mwandi, if I can pick on you for a moment. Look up 1 Chronicles 28:20 and read that to us, and hear the words. The words are significant.
And David said to Solomon, his son, is that the one?
Yes, carry on.
Be strong and of good courage and do it. Fear not, nor be dismayed, for the Lord God, even my God, will be with thee. He will not fail thee nor forsake thee until thou hast finished all the work for the service of the house of the Lord.
Thank you. Do you think it's significant that David says to Solomon, be strong and courageous? Do not be afraid. The Lord your God is with you. Is that not the same charge given to Joshua?
That is the same charge. Actually, I think it's Joshua chapter 1. I think it's the same charge that was given to Joshua.
And what I said to you last night, thank you, Spiwe, as well. What I said to you last night is be strong and courageous for what purpose? For the mission of God, not for the mission of me. So Solomon is given a charge in the words of Joshua, which tells you that David recognizes that what is about to happen is related to Israel getting rest in their land. And what is about to happen? Solomon is about to build the temple. Just chapter 29, verse 23, we read, Solomon sat on the throne of the Lord as king in place of David his father, and he prospered, and all Israel obeyed him. The significance of that verse is Solomon sat not on the throne of David, but on the throne of Yahweh in place of his father David. It's God's kingdom. And then if we look at 1 Kings chapter 8, so the verse that I got up there, the text that I got up there is the beginning of Solomon's prayer. He says, but will God indeed dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you, much less this house that I have built. But listen to the wording of 1 Kings 8, verse 54. Now Solomon finished offering all this prayer and plea to the Lord. He arose from the altar of the Lord, where he had knelt and with his hands outstretched toward heaven. And he stood and blessed all the assembly of Israel with a loud voice, saying, Blessed be the Lord who has given rest to his people, Israel, according to all that he has promised. Not one word has failed of all the good promise which he spoke by Moses his servant. The Lord our God be with us, as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us or forsake us. There's that wording again, right? That we may incline our hearts to him and walk in all his ways and keep all his commandments and statutes and his rules which he has commanded our fathers. Bazawani, what do you notice about the time frame involved in this whole story? Where does it start? I would suggest it starts in Genesis 12, where God promises to establish Abraham and give him a name. God answers the quest of the Babel builders, who want a name and a place, and they want their own humanist religion. And in the shadow of all of that, he calls out of the Chaldeans, the same people who built the tower at Shinar. He calls out of there Abraham, and he says, I'm giving you a land. I will restore to you. You will have fellowship with me. And then 400 years passes, and we pick up the story again. And now you have this band of 2 million people who move out of Egypt, and they wander around, and 40 years later they cross and they conquer the land. And then much time passes, and Joshua is an old man, and he comes back to them. And now they go through this ebb and flow and ebb and flow. You have the period of the judges. And then you have David. And then you have David's son Solomon. And all of this time has passed until eventually Solomon can stand on in the portico, on the veranda of the temple that God has allowed him to build. And he can say, God has given us rest for his enemies. We are not a people who think generation to generation. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes.
What do you think the pastoral application of this might be?
Brian, did you say pastoral?
Yeah. How would you preach this?
Ooh.
I would say patience, Arnold. What do you think?
Long suffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But patience with the purposes of God, right? We don't know how fast our Lord is going to move to bring revival to our nation. He can do it in a day, but he might not. And we might only see the impact of this after we're all gone and our grandchildren are standing proclaiming the gospel. We don't know. But God always keeps his promises. So this is part of the story. I want to take you, before we go into that piece. Let's just open up with me to Joshua 24. There's something remarkable about this little band of Israelites. I kind of asked the question in the previous slide, I think, which says, what is the memory that these people standing before Joshua have? So in Joshua 23, I'll just give you some of the highlights. Just walk with me through 23 and 24. 23 begins with a long time afterward, which is this indeterminate time, which means a long time, right? The story has been running a long time. And Joshua, verse 2, Joshua summons all Israel and the elders and the heads, and he says, I am now old and well advanced in years. He dies, according to the end of chapter 24, he dies at the age of 110 years old. So he's not kidding, he's old. Verse 3 of chapter 23, you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. For it is to the Lord your God, it is the Lord your God who fought, the Lord your God who has fought for you. Then verse 14, I am about to go the way of all the earth. He's about to die. And you know in your hearts and souls, all of you, that not one word has failed of all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you. All have come to pass for you. Not one of them has failed. But just as all the good things that the Lord your God promised concerning you have been fulfilled for you, so the Lord will bring upon you all the evil things until he has destroyed you from off this good land that the Lord your God has given you. If you transgress the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and you shall perish quickly from off the good land that he has given you. Let's just pause there for a moment and give some theological thought to what's going on here. We've reiterated the point multiple times that it is not the goodness of Israel, either as a nation or as individuals, that causes them to earn their way into the land of Canaan, the promised land. And the prologue of the Ten Commandments, God begins by saying, I am Yahweh your God, who brought you up out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery. And then he says, you shall have no other gods before me. So there's an error that we can make. There's two equal errors that we can make around this. The one error is that we read verse 16, what I've just read now. If you transgress the covenant of the Lord your God, the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you. We can read that and say, it was by grace that I came into God's family, but it is by my goodness, my own good works, that I keep myself in God's favor. Right? Is that what is being said here? How would you answer someone who came and said to you, yes, but look, we must do good works, otherwise God is going to close our church. If we are not a church who serves the community, if we are not a church who opens our doors and has a soup kitchen, God will come and remove us, because look at what it says in Joshua. How would you answer that?
Yeah, Brian, I think there's a responsibility that we certainly do have, and I like how you put it, how you phrased it, that one can say, yes, it's by God's grace that we've entered, that we have become whatever it is that we become, or we wherever it is that we are. But then also, for us to stay there, it's really by we choose that. That's a choice that we make. So that's a response that we give, or that that's how we respond. And coincidentally, I was having a conversation about something similar with a work colleague today. Like in relation to the law, we don't before you cross over, before you become a believer, you don't try to do all these things to earn God's favor, or to be in right standing with God. We don't do any of that to achieve God's right standing with God. But when we cross over and then we're on the other side, and we appreciate and recognize and see that it is really by God's grace that we have been chosen by God to be part of His family. At that point on, we now start doing things, not to prove that we love God. I don't know if I'm making sense there. So there's a before and an after, and I think the after part is I need to choose to stay. I know Him now, and then I choose to abide in Him. I choose to do the things that He's called me to do, for me to stay in the promised land.
So somebody, I mean, and thanks for that, because so I hear you saying to our person who wants the soup kitchen, you saying, well, that's not the way. That's not the way you stay in God's favor, and yet there is a response. So think of it now from the other point of view, because what's the opposite error? The opposite error is to say, no, because we are saved by grace, there's no value in keeping the law at all. There's nothing that causes us to keep pursuing righteousness. That's also incorrect. Would you agree? Ben, what do you think?
Just run that by me, Brian, again.
So do So what we're teasing out here, guys, is what is the place of good works for covenant people, right? And he clearly says, if you transgress the covenant, there will be consequences. So, Ben, my question to you is, if somebody then comes and says, no, but we don't need to do anything. Don't worry about the people in the neighborhood. Why are you trying to do all these good things? We're saved by grace. There's no value in doing anything good. It doesn't matter how we live. What's the answer to that objection then?
I would say the fruits, the good works are there's a verse that says faith without works is dead. So our faith, the fruits is a demonstration of our faith.
Very good. So you've seen root and fruit. Okay, Santo, come in there. You're muted still.
I would say, since God has been so faithful to you, you must obey, you must be responsible and obey God's law and love the Lord wholeheartedly and avoid the worship of other idols. And for that, and God will, if you don't listen to God's law, God will withdraw his protection, and you will suffer judgment and defeat and eventually exile from the land.
Right. In a sense, that exile from the land is God's answer to people, and if we go back to Israel, to the Israelites who don't want to live with God. If somebody moves into your house and they start trashing the place, but they like the house, but they don't want you around, eventually you're going to kick them out the house, right? That's just from a human point of view, we see the logic of that. And when you reject living by God's law, it's not God's law that you're rejecting. It is God himself, because the law reflects the character of God. It begins with an identity issue. God says, you are a people of my own possession. I have brought you up. You are mine. And if you are truly mine, not only in body and not only by living in the land, but by responding to me, having me as your God, loving the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, loving your neighbor as yourself. This is what that looks like. You will have no other God. You will worship me only in the way that I want to be worshipped. You won't take my name in vain. You won't call yourself a member of the covenant and yet act as if you are not. You will set your time and your rhythms. You will make worship of me a priority. You will be subject to the authorities that I establish for your good and for my glory. You will not be concerned to take the life or destroy the livelihood of the image bearers of God. You will be faithful to your wife. You will not steal. You will not lie. You will not covet. Why? Not because you're earning my favor, but because that's who you are, right? That's who I've made you to be. And so if somebody, any of us, reaches a point in our spiritual walk where we reject living by God's standard, well, God is right to say, out of my house. Not because you've broken my rules, but because you're showing that you don't own me as your God. You do not love me. All right? And so the works are a necessary fruit of the love of God that he has planted in us. How do you know that you love God? Well, more and more you love to do what pleases him. Bottom line. And that's what's been reflected here at the end of chapter 23. If God is your God, don't break covenant. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Look at what he has given you. Look at who he has shown himself to be. You have nothing to fear. You have nothing to fear. God will look after you. All you have to do is keep your eyes on him and live the way he has called you to live. Walk before him and be blameless. It's a very helpful way of thinking. And you're going to find that in our discussions, the longer you spend with us in the study, the more times you're going to hear this run out, because this is a very easy thing to trip all of us up as believers. And the more you think about it, and the more you try to explain it to one another and to other people, the more it crystallizes in your own heart and mind. This is what God wants you to be. You're not earning your way into heaven. You're not earning your way back to God. But if you truly belong to God, it matters how you live. And so that leads us then into chapter 24, which I find really intriguing, as he gathers the tribes again at Shechem in 24, and he recounts to them what God has done. And then verse 14, he says, "Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served beyond the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord." Now I'm not sure how you hear that. For me, I find that astounding, because he says to them, put away the gods. These are the people that have followed God through the desert. They have conquered the land in the name of Yahweh, their God. And yet, what is in their backpack? The idols that they brought with them. Isn't that amazing? So they've been with him the whole time. Verse 15, "If it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." The people answered, "Far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. For it is the Lord our God who brought us and our fathers up from the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, and who did those great signs in our sight, and preserved us in all the way that we went, and among all the peoples through whom we passed." Right? This is the right answer. This is what they should say. And they keep going. "The Lord drove out before all the peoples the Amorites who lived in the land. Therefore we will also serve the Lord, for he is our God." If you were a pastor and you said what Joshua said in verse 14 and 15, you would want your people to say what these people said in verse 16. But Joshua is not having it. Is this not surprising? Joshua said to the people, "You are not able to serve the Lord. For he is a holy God. He is a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions and sins." What's he saying? That's a very harsh statement. Well, keep going. "If you forsake the Lord and serve foreign gods, then he will turn and do you harm and consume you after having done you good." Joshua knows the heart of the people, that their hearts are given to stray, to drift. Like Calvin said, our hearts are idol factories. And their words mean nothing if their hearts are not given to the Lord. So he presses them. And he says, don't think that you can serve two gods. Don't think that you can pay lip service to Yahweh, who has done all these good things that you have just told me, and yet your heart is far from him. Is that not what Jesus accused the Pharisees of, using the words of the prophet? These people serve me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. The people respond again, verse 21, "No, but we will serve the Lord." And Joshua uses that, and he says to them, "You are witnesses against yourself that you have chosen the Lord to serve him." They say, "We are witnesses." And he says, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you." So it's a final entreaty. It's a charge to sanctification. You don't see your own idols, he says to them. Go through your tent, find your idols, and throw them away. Otherwise, your heart is going to drift. Put away the foreign gods that are among you, and incline your heart to the Lord, the God of Israel. And the people said, the Lord our God we will serve, and his voice we will obey. So Joshua made a covenant with the people that day, and put in place statutes and rules for them at Shechem. Joshua wrote these words in the book of the law of God. And he took a large stone and set it up there, another reminder, under the terebinth that was by the sanctuary of the Lord. So they're still at Shechem. And Joshua said to all the people, behold, this stone will be witnesses against us, for it has heard all the words of the Lord that he spoke to us. Therefore it shall be a witness against you, lest you deal falsely with your God. And Joshua sent the people away, every man to his inheritance. After this, Joshua the son of Nun, the servant of the Lord, died, being 110 years old. They buried him in his own inheritance at Timnath-Serah, which is on the hill country of Ephraim, north of the mountain of Gaash. Israel served the Lord all the days of Joshua and all the days of the elders who outlived Joshua and had known all the work that the Lord did for Israel. As for the bones of Joseph, which the people of Israel brought up from Egypt, they buried them at Shechem, in the place of the land that Jacob had bought for the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for 100 pieces of money. It became an inheritance of the descendants of Joseph. And remember the significance of Joseph's bones. He charges the Israelites at the end of his life, when you go up from Egypt, take my bones with you. And Eleazar the son of Aaron died, and they buried him in Gibeah, the town of Phinehas his son, which he had given him in the hill country of Ephraim. The end. It's a beautiful story. Some people have said it could be the sixth book of a Hexateuch, but it's not written by Moses, obviously, so that's why it's not in the Pentateuch. But it brings the whole story to a sharp point. And what happens from here out is a question of ebb and flow. We'll talk about that on Friday. Ebb and flow, backwards and forwards, up and down. So another two words that you'll hear us use is progress and regress. We're either moving forward with the Lord, or we're moving backwards away from the Lord. You can never truly stand still in your faith. Any other questions or issues that you think are worthwhile raising? Yes, Arnold.
Yeah, Brian, I just wanted to say, when you're talking about how Joshua charges the Israelites to say, throw away your idols, implying that they had idols either in their tents, in their bags, etc. I couldn't help but also just make a connection and think back on Rachel, because when Jacob came away or got away from his father-in-law, we read of Rachel as well, taking the idols of her father and sitting on them and hiding them. Just an interesting connection there.
I think it's a pattern that follows us. We always take our idols with us, and I quite enjoy. I keep going back to in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 9 and 10. Paul describes the conversion of the Thessalonians in terms of you've turned from your idols to worship and serve the living God and to wait for his Son from heaven. And I just love that as a definition of conversion. Turning from your idols to serve the living God. That's always the truth whenever we are coming to the Lord. Spiwe?
Thank you, Brian. And I just made a quick connection while we were talking now, and it's the age in which Joshua died. I think he was 110. So I'm just thinking, and then maybe I'll throw it to the brothers here and Mama Sondo to say, I remember people used to live until 900, 600, whatever the years were. But because of Israel's rebellion, God said that they will not live, they will not see the promised land. So basically the generations will die on their way to the promised land. So 70 by reason of strength, 80 years. But Moses died when he was 120. Then Joshua was 110. I think there's one person also died afterwards when he was 130. So was that the cutoff of the age to say now from now on no more living beyond 120? Was that the final cutoff? Because as I read, I've never I didn't come across anyone who lived beyond 131 or so of age.
Yeah. So if you look at the whole story, especially in Genesis, before the flood, people live 6, 7, 8, 900 years. Methuselah lived 921, is it? And as soon as the flood is done, that starts coming down. Noah lives 600 years. But here's an interesting thought. If you do the maths of the table, the generations, Noah is still alive, get this, just before Abraham is born. Now, you might not immediately see that if you look at the text, but if you just work it out, it's right through the Babel story, Noah's alive. And so the knowledge of God stays very much in collective memory, because you imagine being that many generations later and your great grandfather is still walking down the street waving at you, right? And so but if you look at those age periods after through the table of nations, how long do people live? None of them live very much beyond 100, as you say, 120. And so Abraham, at the age of 90, it's remarkable that Sarah is going to have a child, right? So you can see that it already feels different. And Jacob, when he meets Pharaoh, he says, I have not attained to the age of my fathers, which is interesting because he knows that in not too long ago in our generations, people lived a very long time. So this drop off in time, in age period, is actually related to the flood. It goes all that way back, that people didn't live that long. And there's interesting scientific theories as to why that is. But that's what you're seeing coming down, to the point then that Moses writes those words that you quoted in Psalm 90, our days are but 70, 80 if we have strength. That's how long people should expect to live. And it's not directly related to Israel, it's related to the sin having its effect in terms of the fall, if that helps to answer the question. So for Joshua to live to 110 is a great blessing. For Moses to live to 120 is a great blessing. It shows that God is, and both of those men died as if they were 40-year-olds. They're full of strength, right? But they come to the end of their life. Malwande?
Thank you, Brian. Towards the end of the lesson, in the modern application part, they mentioned the prophecy of Jeremiah 31, verse 31 to 34, where it says, I will put my law within them and I will write it on their hearts. They quote that scripture in connection with covenantal renewal. It seems to me there's a suggestion that the prophecy will be fulfilled in their consummation. I wanted you to comment on that, because I think most of us hold the view that it was fulfilled during the inauguration or the continuation stage.
Yeah, I think I just want to look up the exact reference, but let's just talk about that as a way of principle. What is going on? What are we talking about with the law written on our hearts? I think it is, so you have in the Ten Commandments, you have the law written on tablets of stone. It is external to people, yet the true believers are the ones who live the law almost by nature, right? And you find that I think reflected even in Psalm 51, where David recognizes that it's not the external keeping of the law that makes him right with God; it's the state of the heart. That is reflecting really on what Moses had said time and time again: be circumcised in heart. So it's not the external keeping of the law, but it's the internal. Now, under the old covenant, you would have learned the law and you would have faithfully obeyed and kept that law in loyalty to the God that you loved, right? But in a sense, it's external to you. There's still regeneration, because you can't serve God with an old heart. You still need to be regenerated. But the law is something kind of over there, and we have to go through these external ceremonies to keep the law. But then the law written on our hearts speaks of this regeneration, in which the law is no longer something external written on tablets of stone, but those who serve God with a new nature. I think that is what he's saying. So I would agree that is. I'm just looking at the notes more there. I would agree that is. It starts for every believer at their conversion, and so it is a reality in this continuation part of the kingdom. I'm just looking at the notes here. It isn't difficult to see that Jeremiah's description of the new covenant raises crucial questions for you and me as followers of Christ. If there's no need to call the people of the new covenant to loyal service, then why is the New Testament filled with calls to obedience? If there's no need for warnings about the consequences of the curses, then why does the New Testament warn those who are tempted to turn from Christ? To answer these questions, let's return to what we've seen throughout this series. 3 stages. Okay, there's a little bit more detail. So let me have a look at it in more detail, because I think we'll pick this up on Friday as we get into Samuel as well. Samuel, and then into David. I think in the center of it is the issue of regeneration. I think they're just running through here saying that there's a reality that is found in all 3 stages of the kingdom. I think that's the point that is being made here. Let's pick it up when we meet again on Friday, Bawande. Thanks for the question. All right. Is everybody happy with everybody aware that we meet 2:00 Friday afternoon? We will obviously record the session, so if you're not able to be there for the whole time, or if you're not able to be there at all, the important thing is that you have gone through and listened attentively through all of the modules. So there's 3 more modules on the course on Third Millennium. We'll deal with all 3 of those on Friday afternoon. We'll try not to go for a full 3 hours this Friday, but we'll give ourselves from 2 till 5 to go through that. Yes, Ben?
Yeah, I think I'll join late because I pick up my kid at 2.
Okay.
So I'll join late.
Okay, no problem with that. Like I said, the recording will be available. And then just the last order of business then is please make sure you're available Saturday morning. And I think most of you on the call have good reason to be in the room with me on Saturday morning, so I would strongly advise you to be there. If you can't, if you're very far away, like Arnold, I assume you're still in in Nelspruit, then that's no problem. We will do this online as well. It's just it's a much better conversation than if there's more of us in the room. Spiwe?
Brian, I know maybe this one is out. Can I just ask? I think I just had a bereavement a couple of weeks ago, and then I failed to write my Greek and my Hebrew. So I'm not sure whether you would extend me an olive branch and give me an opportunity to write before I get into the next semester.
Send me a message separately, Spiwe, and we'll make a plan. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Good. And then just a last point on the exam. I was reflecting on it this morning. So normally we try to send out questions beforehand. Given the nature of the intensive course, I don't want to kill you with work in an intensive period of time where you don't have a lot of time available. So I'm not going to send you preparatory questions to go through for Saturday morning. So how will you prepare for Saturday morning? Well, you've already done it because you've been sitting through the last 2 evenings, and just make sure that you've gone through, even if you don't make it for the whole session on Friday afternoon, make sure you have gone through with paying good attention to the Third Millennium videos, and we will work with that. We'll have a conversation. It'll be Saturday morning's exam will be a little bit less structured than what I normally do. We'll have it more of as an open conversation in which everybody gets an opportunity to just share what they're learning and reflect on the course, and basically prove, again, like I always say, prove to yourself that you have actually drunk in and gotten the benefit of the course. So that's the basic arrangements going forward. I'm not going to keep you much longer. If you have any specific questions, please do just feel free to drop me a WhatsApp message and we can have a WhatsApp conversation. But we are 8 minutes over time, so I want to let you go. And if there's anything, just connect with me later on. Thank you so much for your time. Lord be with you. And this is great. I hope it's beneficial. We'll connect on Friday. Same link, 2 p.m. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers,
Thank you
guys.
both.